What if evil didn't die? It just moved on. The movie I'm reviewing today isn't just a crime movie, and it's not just a supernatural horror either. It's something in between, a slow burn, psychological descent into the idea that evil isn't something you can arrest, shoot, or lock away. Because what if evil can jump from person to person? That's the terrifying premise behind the movie that we're reviewing today. So, if I gave you a hint into the movie that we're watching today, if I said, let me tell you about the time I almost died, would you know what movie I'm talking about? Or what if I sang, time is on my side? Yes, it is. Anybody who knows who know. And if you don't know, we are going to be reviewing the movie Fallen, a 1998 film that flew under the radar when it was leaked, but has since gained a cult following for its chilling concept. It's starring Denzel Washington. Now, what if this evil was closer than you already think? Because what if evil can jump from person to person? Again, that's the premise of this film. Right away, we know this isn't going to end well. We follow Detective John Hobbs, played by Denzel Washington, a grounded, logical cop in Philadelphia. He's just helped put away a serial killer named Edgar Reese, a man responsible for brutal murders. So when we first start the movie, Denzel Washington is in a prison, or we're going to start calling him Detective Hobbs from here, John Hobbs. He's in a prison, and Edgar Reese, a killer that he helped put away, is on death row. And this is the beginning of the entity that we'll come to know. This is the beginning for the entity according to the time that he almost died, because it started with Edgar Reese. You see, because Detective John Hobbs is the one who hunted down, caught, arrested, and put Edgar Reese in jail. So he's visiting him in prison and they're making a documentary about him. And this is where he tells Hobbs, it feels like I've seen you somewhere before. And Hobbs is like, oh, yeah, really? Well, okay. Can't say I've had the pleasure before this. And he leaves him with a riddle. He leaves him with a riddle, but not before he tries to touch him. He grabs his hand and he says something in another language. So after that riddle and that really strange interaction where he tried to touch him and he said something in another language, he tells him, have a nice trip, and he leaves. And we see Edgar Reese being led down the hallway, and then he starts singing that song, Time is on his side, except it's not, because he is taking that long walk to the electric chair. Well, it's not the electric chair, it's the gas chamber in this particular instance. So he's being led to the gas chamber. He's singing this song and he starts making these really creepy, unsettling faces. And then all of a sudden, as he's starting to basically die, you see something snaps. And all of a sudden, the jokester, the songster, like all of that leaves him. And then he starts screaming. Like he doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know why this is happening to him. And Edgar Reese, a man who was known to be responsible for brutal murders, is executed. Case closed. Except it's not. John Hobbs is on the news. He's being celebrated. He is the cop that brought down this ferocious serial killer. He's out celebrating. He goes home thinking now that he's finally going to have some time off. This case that took so much out of his life, now he's going to have time to breathe and relax. We find out that John Hobbs is living with his brother and his nephew. He was engaged and his fiancee left when his brother and his nephew had to move in with him. His brother feels some kind of guilt or remorse because he believes, which actually is the truth, that his fiancee, John Hobbs' fiancee, left because he had to take care of his brother, who they don't say it, but it's shown to seem as his brother is on the spectrum, and his nephew. He has to take care of his family. They don't say why his brother and his nephew had to move in. They don't really get into what happened to the mother of his nephew, but his brother and his nephew had to move in. His fiance end up leaving him for it. So now they think they can, he can spend more time with his nephew, he can spend more time with his brother because this case that took so much of his life, his time, and his energy is now over. Unfortunately, soon after Reese's execution, new murders began. Same patterns, same signature, same disturbing behavior. So basically, what would happen, Reese, the killer, would enter someone's home. He would kill them. He would spend time in the house. He would fix himself breakfast. He would stay in the house. And then he would also prank call Hobbs. He would call him from his house and he would hang up. And then after spending an amount of time in this person's home, he would leave. But apparently, they always knew it was him because he would fix some cereal and he would align things or place things in a certain way. And then, of course, it was the prank call calling from the victim's house to John Hobbs' house, from the victim's house, prank calling him, hanging up, calling him, hanging up. So that same pattern after Reese was executed began again. That's where things get unsettling. People connected to Hobbs began acting strangely, and they began singing the Rolling Stones song, Time is on My Side, mimicking Reese's behavior, speaking cryptically, and it feels like a copycat killer. So incredibly creepy the way they was singing this song. And this was the same song that Reese was known to sing. And things become even creepier. In just this scene alone, you will see how the killer or the entity is now moving. So, what I didn't mention is he had gotten that strange message that Edgar Reese said to him in another language translated, and it turned out to be Aramaic, an ancient language. And I also didn't say he found out what the answer to that riddle was. There was a cop a few years ago, about 20 years ago, named Milano. And Milano was chasing a serial killer. This serial killer would go into a victim's home. That serial killer would fix himself something to eat, and he would prank call Milano from the victim's house. You see the pattern there? However, this cop, Milano, figured out what was going on, and Milano committed suicide. At least that's what everyone believed. So now he knows that he is dealing with a serial killer who knows an ancient language. But it seems like this serial killer repeats itself every few years. First is with the cop Milano, and now it's with Detective John Hobbs. And this is where he is about to get his mind blown because now he's going to be able to see how this copycat has been able to emulate with Edgar Reese and emulate with a serial killer that taunted Milano, but everyone thought that Milano was the killer. And he's about to find out how this is possible. How a copycat killer who committed suicide once before and was executed just recently is still active. This is where the film starts to peel back its central idea. This isn't a copycat. This is something else entirely. And this is where we get one of the most fascinating and terrifying elements of the film. That entity that's passing back and forth through touch is Azazel. And Azazel is not your typical movie villain. He doesn't have a fixed body. He doesn't chase victims with weapons. He doesn't even need to be seen. Instead, Azazel is a fallen angel, an ancient entity that can possess human bodies simply through touch. And think about how disturbing that is. A handshake, a brush on the subway, a crowded street. Any moment of physical contact becomes a potential transfer of evil. And the film does something brilliant here. It takes something so mundane, human contact, and it turns it into a source of paranoia. You begin to question everything. Who's really in control? How long has they been possessed? And is anyone even safe? One of the most powerful ideas in this movie is that evil behaves like a virus. It spreads, it adapts, it survives. Unlike traditional crime stories where catching the killer solves the problem, Fallen suggests something far more terrifying. Evil doesn't end, it just changes host. This is reinforced through the film structure. Every time Hobbs thinks he's getting closer, the rules shift. The enemy isn't bound by physical limitations. It's almost philosophical. Is evil external or does it require us to exist? Azazel can only function through people. It needs human bodies to act, which raises a deeper question. Are we vessels or participants? Denzel Washington delivers one of his most underrated performances here. What makes his portrayal of Hobbes so compelling is how grounded he is. He's not a supernatural believer, he's not dramatic or over the top. He reacts like a real person would, confused, skeptical, gradually terrified. You can actually feel the moment when logic starts to break for him. And that's the key because the audience experiences the horror through his perspective. As Hobbes begins to accept what's happening, we're forced to accept it too. Now, let's talk about one of the creepiest elements in the film, the second main character, so to say. The repeated use of the song Time Is on My Side. On the surface, it's just a classic Rolling Stones track, but in Fallen, it becomes something sinister. Every time someone starts singing it, you know Azazel is present. It's playful, mocking, almost taunting, and the lyrics themselves are deeply ironic. Time is on my side. Yes, it is. Because for Azazel, time literally is on his side. He doesn't age, he doesn't die, he just moves on. It turns a familiar song into a psychological trigger. By the end of the movie, hearing that tune feels deeply unsettling. As Hobbs begins to dig deeper into what he's seeing going on that he's not believing, he meets a professor who explains the mythology of fallen angels. Fallen, especially Azazel, specifically Azazel. Fallen angels, which is where the movie gets its name, Fallen. And this mythology professor, do you want to know her name? Milano. Milano's daughter became a mythology professor to try to explain what had happened to her father. And in investigating Milano, he came across his daughter and he had some questions for her, naturally, which completely makes sense. They can only survive in the bodies of others inside of us. And that's when Hobb realizes something terrifying. Just like I said in the beginning, you can't arrest this thing. You can't outsmart it. The only way to stop it might be to trap it. And this leads us to the film's final act, a bleak, calculated attempt to end the cycle. Now, let's talk about one of the most memorable and devastating endings in thriller history. Hobbs devised a plan. He isolates himself in a remote cabin, intending to kill himself while Azazel is inside his body, leaving it with no host. And he developed this plan while investigating Milano, the cop, the reason there was a space between so and so. The riddle that Reese gave him that I am drawing a complete blank on right now. But that suicide that Milano did, where everyone thought he was the killer. Because a thing that I forgot to mention is that Azazel also planted all of this evidence, making Milano look like the killer. And Edgar Reese didn't do this, but the killer is now doing it to Hobbs. And this killer didn't just pick one host. as he did with Edgar Reese. He's jumping from person to person. So there's evidence being left. There's a rotten tooth that was left in the cereal of one victim. There's fingerprints. And it's different fingerprints, different DNA. So it's not one person. So it makes no sense. So once again, it's now looking like Hobbs became so wrapped up, so involved in catching Edgar Reese and feeling like nothing else was going on that he became a serial killer himself and started leaving manufactured evidence. And somehow, all of his cop buddies, even his partner, is looking at him like he's the killer. And here's another thing that I didn't mention in this movie. I mentioned that his brother and his nephew had moved in. Well, Azazel possessed his nephew and killed his brother. So now Hobbs is feeling like there's nothing left. His brother is dead. His nephew killed him. Actually, it was the entity Azazel that possessed his nephew, killed his brother, and he began thinking that Milano had the right idea. See, he found all of this information regarding Azazel at a remote cabin that Milano owned. And this cabin is where Milano killed himself. So he packs up his nephew. He gives his nephew over to Milano's daughter to take care of, to raise, and he devises a plan. He's going to isolate himself in that remote cabin, attending to, again, kill himself while Azazel is inside his body, leaving it with no host. It's a sacrifice, a final stand. And for a moment, it seems like it works. We don't really get the information on Milano's plan, but John Hobbs' plan is this. He goes to the remote cabin. There's no one there. There's no one around for miles. And he laced a cigarette with some poison. He lures Azazel out there. And as a matter of fact, Azazel possessed his partner. He shoots his partner. So now Hobbs has to kill his partner. And at the beginning, when Edgar Reese tried to touch him, he was unable to transfer inside of John Hobbs' body. As a matter of fact, the translation to what he said to him in that prison in Aramaic, I said Aramaic, in Aramaic was, I cannot get inside you by touch, but I'll figure out some other way if I have to, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to say everything he said because it was some very colorful language. But he couldn't get inside of Hobbs' body by touch. But when there is no one else around, when there's no other options, he was able to enter John Hobbs' body. But John Hobbs had smoked a cigarette laced with poison. And I'm going to show you the very beginning scene of the movie, just so you can get an idea of what was going on. And that's how it began. Azazel is inside his body. It's a sacrifice, a final stand. And for a moment, it seems like it works. Azazel appears trapped, unable to find a new host. Host. A new host. He couldn't find a new host, not a new house. There's no other houses around. Oh, it's late at night right now, and my words are just becoming like jumbled together. But Hobbs dies, and that's a victory, right? Azazel is trapped in his body. So if Hobbs dies, he dies, right? Wrong. A motherfucking cat, you guys. A motherfucking cat. Now, as someone who has two cats, let me just say I've never hated a cat more than I hated that cat right there in that mother other moment. Because that's where the film develops its final twist. Azazel transferred into a nearby cat. Now let that sink in. A cat, something so small, overlooked, invisible in plain sight, and suddenly everything becomes clear. Azazel was never truly trapped. He was always one step ahead. He said it. The narration we heard at the beginning, the narration we heard at the end, it wasn't Hobbs. It was Azazel. Because remember, he said he was going to tell you about the time he almost died. Fallen is one of those rare films that sticks with you, not because of jump scares or gore, but because of its idea. It makes you question control, it makes you question morality, and most importantly, it makes you hate fucking cats. No, I'm just playing. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. But it makes you question whether evil is something we fight or something that's always been among us, hidden, waiting, passing from one person to the next. And maybe the scariest part of all, you never know it was standing right next to you. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to subscribe for more breakdowns of hidden gems and psychological thrillers. And remember, be careful who you touch because in Fallen, even doesn't die, it just moves on. Please remember to like, subscribe, and remember to always keep it cute, keep it classy in the comment section. And I will catch you guys on the next one. Bye.